Hi, welcome to Cafe 229. Today we're very happy to have a wonderful guest, Dr. Tom Petriano. He's the professor and the chair of the Religious Study Department at St. Joseph College. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Peter.
How are you?
I'm
Can you
good.
tell our audience a little bit about who you are as a person?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, it's just great being here at Cafe 229 and having this opportunity to dialogue together. I've been a religious studies professor at St. Joseph's College for a good time, long time now, and I teach on both the Brooklyn and Patchogue campuses, and our department has expanded over the years for sure. You know, in the beginning, the orientation was much more toward kind of Christian theology, but the department has expanded in a way that embraces all different faith traditions. We offer courses in Buddhism and Islam and religions of Abraham, and lately we've been collaborating with you and with the psychology department in developing the mindfulness and contemplative living minor, which is just so exciting because it combines psychology and religious studies.
Great. Yeah, it's very wonderful to collaborate together to develop that minor. So today we will have Dr. Petriano to share a little wisdom about how to deal with difficult times such as COVID-19 at this moment. So, Tom, if you want, you can share some of your wisdom with us.
Sure thing. Okay, Peter, thank you. Well, the slide says it all. I think this has been one awful year for all of us as a human family, as a planet. It's been a difficult year, and all of us, either directly or indirectly, have been impacted by the COVID crisis. And there are many different ways in which we can find resources to find our way through this and out of it into hopefully something new and something better. And from the perspective of my discipline in religious studies, I've become particularly interested in spirituality as a resource. You know, there's an Indian proverb that says everyone is a house with 4 rooms, and there's a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual room that makes up each of us. And most of us tend to live in one room most of the time. But unless we spend time in every room every day, even if only to keep it aired, we're not a complete person. I kind of like that proverb. It reminds us that we're not one-dimensional human beings. You know, we are a component of our mental, our emotional, our physical, and our spiritual, and we need to pay attention to all 4 of those components of who we are. So from my perspective, the religious traditions of the world offer a great resource for using spirituality as a way of dealing with life's difficult moments. And I'd like to share with you all this afternoon just a couple of practices that I think are useful, and they're practices that really represent the best of the wisdom traditions of the world. I find that the psychologist, you may have come across some of her work, Brené Brown, has done a lot of work with vulnerability. But in her work with vulnerability, she has talked about different signs of wholehearted, she calls it wholeheartedness. But I've discovered in her work that what she's really talking about is aspects of spiritual wisdom from different religious traditions. And it's a good example of where I think psychology and spirituality come together and fit together very nicely. So spiritual practice number 1, cultivating gratitude, letting go of scarcity and fear of the dark is the language she uses. Scarcity is the culture that we live in. We live in a culture that persuades us that whatever we have is not enough. You know, like you wake up in the morning and I didn't get enough sleep, you know, or I didn't lose enough weight, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough free time. And there never seems to be enough of anything because the culture persuades us that more is always better. But actually in the religious traditions we find something different that can be really helpful for us in dealing with the culture of scarcity. and that is letting go of scarcity, this idea that I never have enough, and recognizing that there is enough, and being grateful for what we have. So gratitude is really spiritual practice number one, and we find all the religious traditions in one way or another talk about the importance of gratitude. I've been interested because of the Buddhism course that I teach in a branch of Buddhism from Japan, Shin Buddhism, which is a branch of Buddhism that doesn't practice to achieve anything per se, not enlightenment or good karma or favorable rebirth or material rewards, but rather they say we practice simply to give thanks for what we have received. Namu Amida Butsu. How wonderful to receive so bountifully. It's a beautiful concept to approach each day with an attitude of enoughness, and with not only an attitude of gratitude, but a practice of gratitude. And we find it in Christianity, in the New Testament, where St. Paul recommends in everything give thanks. Recently, it was the Jewish celebration of Passover, and as Jews gather for the Passover Seder together, they generally sing a hymn called Dayenu, which means it would have been enough. And they go through all the things that God has done for them in their past. And after each thing that they recall, they sing Dayenu. It would have been enough. Even that would have been enough. It's a practice of gratitude. And so as Marianne Williamson tells us, joy is what happens to us when we allow ourselves to recognize how good things really are. The practice of gratitude in the midst of a culture of scarcity. Spiritual practice number two that I find present in all the religious traditions, cultivating calm and stillness. Different religious traditions speak of it slightly different ways, recommend slightly different practices, but at the base of it all is this recognition of the importance of calm and stillness. And I like the fact that it's not only kind of an insight from the spiritual traditions, but of course it's an insight from psychology as well. The importance of calm and stillness. I like the term white space, where we need to find and carve out opportunities and places really in our lives where it's okay to just be still and to do nothing. Is really a valuable practice in a culture that is constantly forcing us to be busy. So finding white space, how do we do it? Well, it could be through various practices of meditation, and there are so many techniques of meditation, but essentially it is finding a still point in our busy lives. For some, it's reading scriptures of the different religious traditions. During the past year, for me personally, some of the Psalms have been especially helpful to read slowly and quietly. Scriptures could be the sutras that come from the Buddhist tradition. I've recently come across the work of Eknath Easwaran, who is Indian, and he has developed something, a practice called passage meditation, where he invites us to focus on a passage from a sacred text. And he's put together collections of sacred texts from all the different religious traditions, and just short text, short excerpts to use for meditation, for quiet, peaceful reading, and that's why it's called passage meditation. Mantras can be another way of cultivating calm and stillness. Using beads with a mantra can be a wonderful way of finding stillness. You know, we're in a very beautiful, quiet space here, but there's traffic and noise outside. But even in the midst of that, we can practice calm and stillness, and it's a tremendously healing practice, I think. Practice number 3, cultivating trust. Gosh, one of the things I've learned from my interest in and study of the various religious traditions of the world is trust. Always come back to trust and letting go of the need for certainty. There seems to be a built-in need that we have to want things certain. Certainty about the future, certainty about what's going to happen next. And the religious traditions all tell us that in the face of uncertainty, which is the true condition of our lives, we need to practice trust. And again, we see it in the various religious traditions. The Passover, it's on my mind because recently the Jewish community celebrated Passover. And the idea of Passover is it's not enough just to leave the slavery of Egypt, but we must, they remind themselves, enter the promised land. In other words, enter something new, enter the unknown, right? Even though the unknown is always uncertain, but it's trust that enables us to enter the promised land. Or I love the theme from Pema Chodron, the Tibetan Buddhist nun. She says, when we stand at the crossroads, not knowing which way to go, we abide in prajnaparamita, which is the perfection of wisdom. But we discover the perfection of wisdom when we stand at the crossroads, when we acknowledge the uncertainty, when we accept the uncertainty and move into the unknown with trust. We find the theme in Christianity, for sure, in many different examples, in many different ways, but of course, the very human experience of Jesus' life coming to an end in the crucifixion. As Jews celebrated Passover, Christians celebrated Easter. I think in the Greek Orthodox Church, it's actually Holy Week and Good Friday and Easter this weekend. And that experience of Jesus embracing his death and the uncertainty of his end with trust is another example. And of course, I think there's so many more. You know, if we examine religious traditions, Pope Francis, interestingly, recently wrote a book about his experience of the past year and living through COVID. And he suggests that we're actually, as a world, as a planet, living in what he calls a Noah moment right now. You know, Noah lived through the flood. That was the disaster of the Bible that is instructive for us, because from the flood came a new moment. The rainbow was the symbol of that moment, but it was a new moment, right? It wasn't going back to the old, but it was in recognizing something new coming out of, in that case, the flood. For us, living in the trust that something new and good can come out of what we have all been living through the past year. Spiritual practice number 4. I love this one. Again, I'm using the language of Brené Brown here when she talks about cultivating self-compassion and letting go of perfectionism. We've had this discussion many times about compassion and the importance of compassion. We're sitting in a building here that is devoted to compassion, and yet an important component of compassion, sometimes forgotten, is self-compassion. That we need to be kind to ourselves, right? And that's hard when we live in a culture that is so seductive in presenting perfection as a goal. You know, that we are seduced by our culture into you know, the perfect smile, the perfect teeth, the perfect eyes, the perfect body, the perfect paper. You know, everything is oriented toward perfection, and of course it is an unattainable goal. And self-compassion becomes an expression of compassion for ourselves, and recognizing that nothing is perfect, and no one of us is perfect. Self-compassion enables us to accept the reality of the imperfection of who we all are. You know, Leonard Cohen has this great song, it's called Anthem, and I love this line in it. Ring the bells that still ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And there's a crack in everything, and that means in each of us and in all of us. The Japanese have this wonderful concept of wabi-sabi, right, which is appreciating the beauty that is imperfect and incomplete. And in fact, Japanese artists very often will incorporate some imperfection into their art, especially in their pottery, to acknowledge that fact, the beauty of imperfection, and to recognize our imperfections as something that have a beauty to them, right, and that we can accept. Enables us to practice self-kindness. Perfectionism can be addictive. Perfectionism can be destructive. I think the spiritual traditions remind us that an important part of compassion and love is loving ourselves, and that always means letting go of the drive for perfection.
Makes sense.
The last one I'd just like to share with all of you for a minute or two today is practice number 5, cultivating play and rest, with a very interesting image on the upper left corner of your screen, which I will explain shortly. But again, we live, I think, and probably I'm sure you see this a lot, Peter, we live in a culture where people are exhausted, right? We're frenzied because exhaustion on some level is seen as a status symbol. Productivity is associated with self-worth. You know, I see this in conversations with colleagues and friends, you know, oh, I'm so busy, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that. And the message underlying that is, you know, I must be important because I'm so busy. And if I'm not so busy, I'm not that important. Well, you know, in the religious traditions, spiritual traditions, I'll just first draw on the Judeo-Christian tradition the concept of Sabbath time, that even God, you know, rested on the seventh day, the Sabbath. You know, that rest is an important practice. It's recuperative, it's restorative, it's regenerating, and I would suggest to all of you listening today that it is indeed a spiritual practice. I've learned from my kind of conversations with you, Peter, and studying a little bit of Eastern religions, that one of them, sort of the treasures of sort of Eastern wisdom is less is more. You don't have to be so busy. You don't have to do all these things. In fact, sometimes, most times, it's better to do less than to do more. You know, they tell the story of these 2 lawyers who are going up to their office in a tall high-rise here in Manhattan, and they're having a conversation on the elevator, and one lawyer says, oh man, I didn't get out of here till 1 o'clock in the morning last night. And the other lawyer says, well, I didn't even go home yet. You know, and they're sort of out competing each other in who's busier and who's doing more. When in fact, the wisdom of the spiritual traditions tell us that less can be more. Rest and even play. Playful. It would be interesting to have a conversation about, you know, what psychology tells us about playfulness as not a waste of time, but something that's also restorative. And since I teach with you, Peter, at St. Joseph's College, I couldn't help but include this image of St. Joseph. It's a unusual image of St. Joseph. Usually you see him with his son Jesus and Mary and the Holy Family together. But this is Joseph sleeping, because it was while he was asleep that he had a dream in which he was instructed to travel to take Jesus and Mary to Bethlehem by a different road, because Herod was out to kill all the firstborn Jewish sons. But the statue is interesting because it was during his sleep that he had the insight, the dream, the vision, you might say. And it represents, I think, for me, the fact that sleep maybe can be a spiritual practice, you know, along with play. Maybe a different way of thinking about it, but I think it can be useful and restorative for all of us. And to bring us finally to a Noah moment. This is the language of Pope Francis. He says, the good news is that an ark awaits us to carry us to a new tomorrow. And COVID-19 is our Noah moment. As long as we can find our way to the ark of the ties that unite us, of love and common belonging. And maybe that's one thing that we have been taught by what we've all been through this whole year, because we're all in it together. We can't. We're all connected, and we've learned that in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so the Noah story in Genesis is not just how God offered a path out of destruction, but about all that followed, the regeneration of human society, a return to respecting limits, curbing the reckless pursuit of wealth and power, looking out for the poor and those living on the edges. I think this is the challenge that's on the other side of COVID for all of us. The introduction of the Sabbath and Jubilee year in Judaism suggests moments of recovery and reparation, forgiving debts, restoring relationships were key to that regeneration, and giving time for the earth to bounce back, for the poor to find fresh hope, for people to find their souls again. That's the grace that I think is available to us all now, the light in the midst of the tribulation we have all been through. It's an opportunity that lies ahead of us, an opportunity that hopefully we won't throw away, and that hopefully some of these spiritual practices can help us come to the light of that Noah moment.
This is a wonderful presentation. I really personally learned a lot just by listening to your wisdom. So, and I think it's a great analogy, this Noah moment, right? I mean,
Yes.
this COVID-19 time.
Yes.
It's not just a time that's been dangerous, but it's also a time of opportunity. And one of your points is to trust, right? To trust that we all have this resiliency to be together, to connect with each other, and to hold hands and to work together, to move beyond this dangerous time, right?
Yeah, I think the trust is essential. And the together, right? Doing it together.
Yeah.
I think the past year has really reminded us, and I just hope we can all remember, that we are truly all in this together. You know?
So it's really a trust in our humanity, right?
Yes.
Trust in goodness.
Trust in goodness, trust in humanity, and trust in the future that is always making itself known to us, but we don't have the luxury of seeing it. We don't have a crystal ball.
Right. We don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Because we can't connect the dots.
Precisely, and that can be scary. You know, that
Right.
can be very scary, and this is why trust becomes so important.
So I think you named some really important point. I think I hear from, of course, from the Eastern tradition as well, the importance of gratitude, right? The ability to still our mind, right? The concept of compassion, especially compassion to ourselves, right? And this ability to play and rest. So, in fact, actually, one of our speakers, Roshi O'Hara, talked about how when people do service, when they do like altruistic behavior in service, sometimes people are so serious. Like service should be playful, should be fun.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, you know, I think you know one of the programs we have at the college is we call it the Nicaragua Project, where we've been for the past 10 years taking students to a village in Nicaragua, a very kind of poor community there, and students have been going there. We haven't gone this past year, of course,
Sure.
but it really is a perfect example of what you just mentioned, Peter. That they're going there to really try and give help to the community there, and that's needy in so many ways. But our students enjoy it. You know, there's a playfulness that they bring. They do a lot of work with children there, and one of the reasons why they enjoy going there so much is because there is an element of playfulness in their interaction, and it's something that they enjoy. And I think that's an excellent point. It doesn't have to be so serious.
Yeah, well, it's interesting about the Nicaragua Project because it's not like a Disneyland place. Our students are going there, right? It's a place where they go there to help out.
Yes.
So how do you sort of invite them? How do you, motivate our students, our young adults in general to go to a place that may not be like, seeing nice buildings, shopping,
right, exactly.
right?
Yeah, well, it's first of all, it's taught me the tremendous generosity that our students have, their willingness to do something like this. In fact, it was first presented as an alternative spring break. That it would be the very first year we did it was during spring break, and typically college students think of spring break as a time to go and have a good time,
right?
And go to the beach and go to Florida or wherever they go to enjoy spring break. But this was an alternative spring break, an opportunity to do service, and as you say, they knew because we actually connected, and I think this is important, we connected the service project with a course, so it fits into global service learning, so that it wasn't where we just got on a plane and went there, but we spent, several weeks prior to spring break talking about Latin America, talking about the culture, talking about the politics, talking about the economics, talking about the impact of colonialism, so that they had a good idea of what they were walking into when we visited there. And I think that was important. But they knew, we weren't going to a 5-star hotel, there were no hot showers, it was very rugged, and yet they were ready and willing, and it was a transformative experience for them. The opportunity to render service, the opportunity to live in poverty with others who live in poverty was really transformative. I think every single student that has gone there has been impacted by the experience of service, of living with, not just helping out and going back to your own home, but living with and in a community was a very powerful experience for them, and it's convinced me of service as an important part of learning.
I agree very much what you said, because I think personally, reflecting back, I may start a Buddhist practice at a young age, but I don't think I took it as serious until I started to do some kind of service work. I still remember very much of my first service work when I went to somewhere really poor, and when I'm like helping people who really don't have much. It actually really, what's the word? It really changed something in me. It's sort of like when you confront with some kind of reality.
Yes.
It naturally would help one to cultivate this sense of gratitude.
Yes.
Since we're talking about gratitude, and so one question I always have, everyone knows they need to have more gratitude, but how do we help people to cultivate that, right? As a religious study professor.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the key word is cultivating gratitude.
Yeah.
And it's I think recognizing that what I have is enough, and not being so pulled by the culture, which always wants us to have more. Media and advertising companies make their money by telling us what we have is not enough, and we need the better and the bigger and the best. So I think recognizing, I don't think this is an English word, but enoughness. There's an enoughness to what I have, and accepting and recognizing what I have, and as you said, experiencing life as other people live it in other parts of the world can help bring about that recognition.
Yeah, right. I think it's a very important idea that we all need to cultivate this sense of gratitude, and also I guess, of course, to be able to have certain gratitude, I think self-love and self-compassion probably needs to be there too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh yeah, they go together. And I've been reading some of the work of Brené Brown, and I think she does, bridge the psychology, spirituality gap really in her work. And she talks about, and many other authors too, I think, talk about developing gratitude practices. So, and I think there's some research where people who at the end of each day can actually say, there are 5 things. You challenge yourself at the end of each day. 5 things that happened that I liked, or 5 things that happened that I recognized were actually good.
Right.
To actually do that, to engage that as a practice, can be really helpful, because it forces us. You think back upon your day, and I think of the policeman who pointed me in the right direction when I was lost when I got out of the subway to come here this morning.
Right.
Just that kindness, I'm grateful for it. And I look back on my day, and we find that there's a heck of a lot there.
So it is, I guess, it is an art, right, as a religious professor, to sort of motivate people to engage in spiritual practice, right? And I think our minor has
Yes.
that kind of common goal, right? To bring the East and West tradition together, the wisdom tradition, the
Yes.
spiritual tradition together, and hoping to promote a bit more spirituality among our community. So you're an interesting professor to me, because you actually teach both, right? You teach both the Eastern spirituality practice and the Western spirituality, Western spirituality practice on campus. What do you find the similarity and differences between the spiritual practice?
Yeah, that's such a great question. What I've discovered, as you know, my orientation is Western, my tradition is Western, but out of that tradition kind of has grown an interest in and an appreciation of the Eastern as well. And I've discovered, that every religion has particularities and universalities. That every religion has certain elements that are particular to it, but underlying those particularities are certain universal themes. And it's been an exciting journey for me to discover some of the universal underlying themes. So that it's not to say that there aren't particulars that are different, but there are underlying themes. And I think the 5 spiritual practices we've been just talking about, you find in all the different religious traditions. Compassion. Gosh, compassion is an underlying theme in all the great religious traditions, and contemplation. Contemplation, and I find that the contemplative traditions in the East and the West, on the surface, it may seem different, but when you go deeper, you find certain common elements. I've found for myself in my own life as a kind of guide and mentor the Trappist monk Thomas Merton. And Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk. The second half of his life he lived in a monastery in Kentucky. But from that monastery he was drawn to other spiritual traditions and Eastern religions, and especially Zen Buddhism. He had conversations and correspondences with Daisetsu Suzuki, and I think he discovered, that underlying sort of differences in maybe approaches to contemplation in East and West, there are certain similarities. The deeper you go, the more you become aware of the wholeness of everything. And interestingly, he died in Bangkok, Thailand, when he was at a conference, a Buddhist Christian monks conference. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
Yeah, and he had a very unusual, strange death. Apparently electrocuted in his room when he went up to his room after the conference. But it was But it was with Buddhist and Christian monks coming together, and he brought many of them together. And I think when the dialogue takes place, you find, we're looking for the same thing, and we're also finding that our contemplation doesn't just bring us into ourselves, but it leads us out of ourselves. That's where the compassion comes in also, right? That in contemplation, we recognize our connectedness with all things. And I think this is Christian and Eastern and Western, right? And it's that recognition of our interconnectedness that moves us outward to engage in the world in compassion.
So would you say that the word contemplation, if we want to define it, is really a way of investigating where we come from, what makes us who we are, and then the realization of this interconnectedness? with everyone else, the world, the no one. I mean,
Yeah.
we're on the same boat.
Right, yes,
We're on
exactly.
the same boat, and if we're on the same boat, we should do something together.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, I
Right.
think that's a really fine way of putting it.
Right. So it doesn't matter which religion you're from.
I firmly believe that. Yeah,
Right,
I firmly
right.
believe that. Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it's just been so interesting, the evolution of our own collaboration through conversation. You know, in Lorenzo Hall in Brooklyn, we would
Right.
run into each other and we would have conversations similar to the conversation we're having here, and somewhere along the line that led to say, well, yeah, there are some similarities. Why don't we start an interdisciplinary minor?
Right.
And the similarities are not only between sort of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, but I think we both discovered even psychology and religious studies. There's some overlap there, and I find it so interesting that so many of the psychology majors also find that they're interested in some religious studies courses because they see some connections. You know?
Now, we both are teaching at a liberal art college, which is a challenging time, I think, for now as well, because I think there's a push that people should just learn job skills when they go to college. Like, why come to liberal art? Right? It's like, why learn religious studies? So, as a religious professor, can you say a little bit about how important it is that religious study can be for all of us?
Yeah, sure. Like yourself, you know, I lament the fact that liberal arts are their significance in higher education is under siege right now and being challenged, and I think that's really to the detriment of the students we educate, because all of the liberal arts in general, I think, and certainly religious studies as one of them, focuses on the questions of what it means to be human, you know, and what is human nature? What does it mean to live a good life? Who am I? You know, I begin most of my courses by inviting students to think about questions. You know, the ultimate questions. You know, like who am I? Why am I here? Why are any of us here? You know, what is the nature of human existence? What is there a purpose? And religions are sort of one facet of the human story that attempt to help us understand those fundamental questions. You know, not only, I guess this is the way I would put it, not only to make a living, but to make a life. You know? I think that's the difference.
Excellent, excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Because I think our society are pushing more of making a living.
Yes, absolutely.
Making a living. So the concept of religious study, the concept of liberal art, I guess I like to use the word liberal means free.
Free,
right?
yes.
Right, it's like we want to free ourselves, but what is trapping us, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that idea.
So I like the question that you offer. It seems like then, and same thing for our audience, is that life is probably more than just making fame and making a fortune, but really to be interested in existential questions.
Yes, exactly.
Right, existential challenges. Doesn't matter you're rich or poor, that you will all, we all will face someday.
Again, if I can quote Thomas Merton, he wrote at some point, he said, most of us spend the first half of our life climbing the ladder of success until we realize that the ladder was up against the wrong building, you know, right? Everything we've been pursuing and identifying as success is wrong, you know. And you know, the liberal arts, I think, help us to realize, you know, what value is, what true values are, what matters.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that the challenge really then is how do we motivate people to be more interested in this kind of existential challenges, existential question. A lot of people are focused so much on the ladder, even they just focus on the ladder, the car I have, right? Right, the job title I got, but they're really climbing the wrong house in some way. So any stories from your student that you think that could be inspiring for our audience?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, I continue to be impressed by our students, by their generosity, by their idealism, and when we appeal to that, I think they respond. I think their approach to religion, is not the religion, of going to church or to temple or to mosque, but it's action, and compassion in action. They respond to that, and just what I've seen of students who have gone to Nicaragua. I'll use that example again, if I may.
Sure.
And come back, and decide. I'm thinking of one student in particular, wanted to be a human rights lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was that experience that helped crystallize for him, what his path in life was going to be, and it was to be a human rights lawyer. Actually, other students who have gone there too have pursued law for that reason, really, seeing law as a way in which they could be of help and service. Other students have gone into like Teach for America,
right,
because of their experience there. We've given them the opportunity to see what making a difference can be like, and therefore making them sort of rethink priorities in their own lives, for the path that they want to follow in their own lives, where their talents and abilities can meet life's needs, and they could make a contribution. I mean, it's wonderful to see that. Wonderful to see that.
So I think this is a wonderful story because I think it seems like one of a very concrete way to invite people to be interested in existential issues, to cultivate more gratitude, to cultivate more compassion is service, right? It is really compassion in action.
Yes.
That is sort of one of the quickest route to invite people to sort of discover their own sort of potential of this goodness, to trust that resiliency that we all have for this big, tough moment.
Yes.
Right, and so service invite us to this Noah moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So we can probably name this episode as the Noah moment.
I would love that. Yeah, the Noah moment. Yeah.
Yes. So our time is pretty almost up. Any final words for our audience?
Well, it's been delightful to have this conversation today, and thank you all for your time and patience in listening. I'm really impressed by the work that's being done here, and it's just another example of what can happen when we all work together, and we're not as different as sometimes people like to tell us we are.
Great. And thank you, Tom, for being here with us, and I hope we all can find our Noah moment at this tough time. Thank you for watching.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Peter.